Good afternoon, good morning to everyone that's joined, and thank you very much for joining us. And in particular, thank you to everyone that has submitted some questions in advance. It's extremely helpful. My name is Piers Parnell. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Clipped. As you know, hopefully, I'm sure, there were a few sort of early season issues with Spike Mark, and in mid-October, Clipped were asked by each of the national collegiate bodies to assume responsibility for the data platform that publishes all scores and results and rankings for the NCAA, the NAIA, and the NJCAA. Specifically, we're here today, obviously, to talk about the new college ranking system devised by Professor Mark Broadie. He's been very kind enough to give us his time. And as you all know, Mark was commissioned to produce a new college ranking system and methodology by Spike Mark in conjunction with the NCAA. Really, our role here today is to provide you all access to Professor Broadie and to the NCAA, specifically to facilitate a greater level of understanding and transparency around the new rankings. Hopefully, all or many of you will have seen that we have done already a lot to communicate how the new system works through FAQs that have been published in a number of different domains online, and shared through emails by each of the governing bodies, including the GCAA and WGCA. But really today is about you. It's about answering your questions. And while we've scheduled this webinar for an hour, there are, I think, in excess of 200 people online right now. So I'd anticipate that we're probably going to go through that. But perhaps we should call a long stop time of 90 minutes, bearing in mind that there is a repeat or another opportunity next Tuesday at the same time, 11 o'clock Eastern, to engage in another webinar. And of course, we will all be in Las Vegas for the GCAA and WGCA convention 2 weeks from now. I think finally, look, we recognize how important this is to everyone on the call and to the wider college golf community. Very grateful that people have made the effort to turn up. Collectively, we will do everything that is humanly possible to provide clarity and understanding, and that through this process, we firmly believe that in time we will all arrive at a better place in terms of the experience of college golf. Before handing over to Clipp's Head of Communications, Dan Davies, I want to, who will run through the format and house rules for today's webinar. I just want to hand over quickly to John Baldwin of the NCAA, who would like to say a few words. And thank you all for your time.
Thank you, Piers, and as Piers said, thanks to everyone for your time and for being with us today. My name is John Baldwin. I'm representing our staff here at the NCAA on today's call. Before turning over to Dan Davies from Clipped and ultimately to Professor Mark Broadie, I do want to take a moment to first acknowledge and also apologize for what can only be described as a disruptive fall season. That's not what we're here to talk about today, but certainly want to acknowledge it, and on behalf of our staff, apologize for it. When the decision was made to move to a new scoring and ranking platform, there was certainly an understanding from our side of things that there would be some bumps along the way, some things that would need to be worked through during the transition. And obviously, those challenges proved to be significant at the outset of the season and throughout the majority of the fall semester. And again, for that, we apologize to each of you all as coaches and to your student athletes. We're thankful that Clipped and the Clipped team has jumped in. They've dedicated a significant amount of resources. They've built a platform to warehouse and publish the tournament results and rankings. And we're confident that working alongside them, that the experience during the spring season is going to be significantly improved and in line with what you all and your student athletes deserve. there has been significant progress that's been made over the course of the fall. With that, there have still been, since the rankings were released last week, some notes that have come in with regard to some data corrections that need to be made, or events that aren't appearing. We would just continue to ask that if you come across those, please send those to us, so that we can ensure that we do have complete accuracy with the results as we head into the spring season. So please don't hesitate to send us those items and want to start from a place of 100% accuracy as we move into the spring and championship season. I do want to hit on two other specific items quickly before turning over to Dan. One, we've received several questions from across all divisions about the role of the national and regional advisory committees for the NCAA. Just want to note that nothing has changed with regard to that structure, with regard to those processes. Our national committees, and in divisions 2 and 3, our regional advisory committees will continue to evaluate just as they've done in prior years, using the selection criteria as published. In divisions 2 and 3, we will continue to have regional rankings that are produced first through regional advisory committee calls and ultimately through the national committees. Those will be published as they have been in prior years, and ultimately the national committees will select the fields for our regionals and national championships. Again, that process is unchanged. We've also heard over the course of the last week a desire from many in Division 2 to have a national ranking shown on the Spike Mark website. That's something that can and will be done by Clipped in the near future. The ranking and selection processes for Division 2, as you all know, are regional only. Thus, the decision was made initially to show rankings in that manner, consistent with how rankings and selections ultimately occur. Based on the feedback that we've received, it's clear there's a desire from the membership for national visibility in terms of rankings in Division 2s, and we can certainly work to make that available in the near future. With that, I will turn it over to Dan Davies for some additional information. Again, thanks to the Clip team and to Professor Broadie for being with us this morning, and thanks to each of you for your time, for your questions, and for your continued collaboration as we move forward positively in the weeks and months ahead.
Thanks, John. Hi, my name is Dan Davis, and I'm the head of comms for Clipped. For the first half of today's webinar, Mark Broadie will respond to questions submitted in advance. In the interest of time and efficiency, we've grouped these into 3 areas that have prompted the most feedback. The first is cross-divisional play. So is it better to play up a division? The second is the actual ranking results, why our teams ranked where they are. And the third is match play. Mark will share slides that demonstrate his methodology and speak to specific examples that have been submitted by coaches. At the end of each section, we will have a short Q&A section about that specific part of the ranking system. These sessions will last for around 5 or 10 minutes, and you can submit questions in advance by clicking the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. With around 200 people on the webinar, it will not be possible to answer every question, and we apologize for that, but we will do our best to ensure we cover the most important ones. And you can help us in this by giving a thumbs up to questions that you feel need to be prioritized. Once Professor Broadie has covered these 3 main areas about the ranking system, we will move to a general Q&A session. Again, please submit your questions by clicking the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. And please also give a thumbs up to a question rather than duplicating it. That way we can really focus on the questions that you want answered. As Piers said, and as John has said at Clipped, we are committed to ensuring transparency and facilitating understanding of the ranking system. The reality is we will not be able to cover everything today, but you can submit any outstanding questions you have to support@clipped.io, and we will provide answers from Mark Broadie. We will also add these to the list of the FAQs that are already published on the website. And to John's point, if you do have data inaccuracies that you want to report, please send those to results@spikemark.com, and we will make sure those are actioned. Thank you for your time. Now let's hand over to Professor Mark Broadie.
Thank you so much, Dan, and thanks to Piers and John as well, but especially thanks to all of the now I see 225 participants. I'm going to try and cover as much material as I can to get through all of your questions. So in the interest of time, I'm just going to get started here. So we're going to talk about the college golf ranking system, and kind of broken this up into many questions were submitted beforehand, and we looked at what were the main areas of questions and put those into this presentation. So Dan went through this outline. So just to begin, we're going to first talk about the ranking method. There are some general questions. How does this work? And it's a little bit easier to answer these questions now with more specifics with the rankings that you can see. So the goals have always been to create a fair, accurate, and transparent system. And we want to talk about how these goals are achieved. We developed something called the strokes gained to points ranking system that is built on a state-of-the-art strokes gained calculation. Strokes gained is strokes gained at a neutral course, which is a little bit different than in consumer apps and a little bit different than what's on the PGA Tour, but I'm still going to use strokes gained for short. You can think of strokes gained as head-to-head analysis on steroids. It includes stroke differentials. And if you're not familiar with strokes gained, just think adjusted scores. It's basically, there's a one-to-one correspondence between strokes gained and adjusted scores. We don't do a strokes rate gained ranking directly. We have a points-based system, and the reasons for that are several. One is you can see the points, so it's more transparent. And I'd say for better or for worse, when it's transparent, now we can get all the feedback, and you can see where the points in your ranking come from. We can also see whether two teams are ranked close together or further apart. 1 and 2 could be neck and neck, or there could be a big gap between 1 and 2. Points allow for projected rankings, which will happen in the spring. It allows match play to be included, and it allows a premium for above average performances and less penalty for below average performances. But the punchline is the foundation of this ranking system is head-to-head results. So for a head-to-head ranking system to work, you take results of two teams that are playing each other, but you need to be able to connect them to every team that you're trying to rank. And at the beginning of the season, the figure on the left shows that many teams haven't played and a few teams have just started to play. And after a few weeks into the season, there's still a bunch of teams that haven't played, but there's separate isolated clusters of teams, and it's not possible in any ranking method at all to rank these separate clusters together unless additional assumptions are made. But as we go through the season, you can see that there are no isolated clusters, and the ties between different teams become stronger and stronger and stronger. And we are on the right at the end of the fall season. Every single team is connected, usually in many, many ways with other teams. So it's a very interconnected system, which allows all of these head-to-head connections to be used to estimate strokes gain values. And we also put all divisions in together, and cross-divisional play increases the number of connections and the accuracy of the results. I have the left chart for men individuals, the right chart for men teams, and you can see very similar connections. This isn't like 6 degrees of separation. Have you heard that before? 1 or 2 degrees of separation are all you need to do to get from basically any team to any other team. There's a huge number of these links that enable fair and accurate rankings. Okay, so without going through the details of strokes gained, I want to just give you some high-level results to give you some comfort level that this strokes gained calculation gives sensible results. So all the strokes gained routine sees are which teams played in which events and what were their scores. There is no information about course difficulty, course length, course setup, even which division teams were playing in is not known to the strokes gained routine. So the results that you see here are output after we look at the results and then bucket the strokes gained results by league and by division. And you can see among the women, whether you look at the top 20 or all women's teams, the very best of these 4 leagues and divisions is NCAA Division I. And all that matters are differences in strokes gained. And so you can see from this that Division II is about 6 strokes per round behind Division I. And that's if you look at the top 20 of Division I versus the top 20 teams in Division II, and then top 20 by strokes gained. And you see similar sort of differences as you go down to Division II and Division III. You can also see that NAIA teams are roughly comparable to NCAA Division III. And similar results happen for men's teams, although the differences are more compressed. There's about a 4-stroke per round difference between the top 20 men's teams in Division I and the top 20 men's teams in Division II. Again, we didn't put anything in the data to the algorithm that says these were Division I, II, or III teams or NAIA teams. This was an output of the analysis just to try and give you some comfort level that this mathematical system works by taking into account all of these head-to-head results. So the general procedure is we start from scores, we turn them into strokes gained at each event, then points are awarded, and those are averaged to create a ranking. So that's kind of the process. Points-based systems are used in many sports, tennis, swimming, fencing, and all sorts of others. We have a premium for above average performance, and part of the reason for that is we want above average performances to help more than below average performances hurt. There's no dropping of your worst performance or your worst 2, like in a golf handicap system where you keep the best 8 out of 20, which is measuring your potential. This is trying to measure your performance over all events, and we want it to be that one very poor event cannot ruin an entire season. And this performance premium that we introduced with points kind of allows that to happen. Okay, so getting into some questions. Is it better to play up? Is it better for a team to play in a stronger event to get more points? Is it better to play up a division even to get more points? And the answer is no. And that's surprising in light of information like this that you can see in the website. So there have been a number of questions from coaches about the ranking of Rollins College. And if you take a look at their performance, they earned on average more points playing out of their division in D1 than playing in their D2 division. So in their division, they averaged 24 points. And out of their division, they averaged 57 points. And so seeing a result like that, it's natural to wonder, maybe I should be, if I'm a D1 team, maybe I should be playing in D1 events. It looks like there's an advantage to doing that. The short answer to that is not correct. And I need to go through a little bit to explain why that is. But the punchline is, we're looking at one single D2 event, which happened to be the worst of the 4 performances from Rollins College. So you're comparing their worst performance, which just happened to be in D2, with 3 other better performances in D1. And they got more points in D1 because they played better, and less points in D2 because they had a single bad event or less than average event. So you can't take my word for it. Okay, how would you systematically kind of address this question, whether it's better to play in a different division than your own? And you don't want to look at one data point. And this is not only one college, but it's one event for one college. So we need to look more systematically across the data. And let me just show you 3 other results: Ferris State University, Drury University, Thomas More, and Rollins Collins, which we just saw in the bottom right. If you take a look at Ferris University, they earned more points, 6.5, playing in their division than out of their division. If you take a look at Drury University, they earned more points playing in their division than out of their division. If you take a look at Thomas More, it's about a wash, it's about the same, and Rollins College, we saw, went the other way. Now, another thing to notice, if you take a look at that, 24 versus 56 looks like a big point difference, but what matters for Ferris State University is kind of the ratio of these points. In versus out of the division is about a factor of 50% or something on that order of magnitude. 4.5 is 50% more than 3. And so the differences here are not small. The differences are as large as they are for Rollins College. Well, not quite as large, but similarly large, because it's the ratio of points. It's points relative to teams in your neighborhood that matter. And so if your average is around 4, the difference between 8 points and 2 points is significant. If your average points is 40, the difference between 80 and 20 is significant. So you just don't want to take a look at absolute numbers when you're comparing across very different strengths of teams. Again, this is only 4 cases, but you look at each of these 4 universities, and there's only one event played out of the division for Ferris State, Drury University, and Thomas More. The rest are in division play. So this, even though it's now 4 colleges or universities that we're looking at, is still a very small sample. So what I did was I looked across all schools that play events in and out of their divisions. And this is now much more reliable results. If you take a look at D2 women, they earn the same points and they have the same strokes gained if they play within the D2 women's division or if they play out of their division. These numbers are identical to any sort of statistical confidence. D3 women, those differences are not statistically significant. D2 men, not statistically significant. D3 men, not statistically significant. So if you play in any division and you look across all the data, you get the same strokes gained and the same points playing in or out of your division. The problem with looking at Rollins College is it's just one data point out of hundreds, and that one data point involves one event that's different. So the message here really is there's no advantage or disadvantage playing in or out of your division. There's no difference in strokes gained. There's no difference in points on average. Sure, if you take a look at a small sample, it can go either way. But if on average there are, it's a tie, it doesn't matter if you play in or out of your division. For every Rollins College example, there's going to be other examples that go the other way. So there's no advantage, there's no disadvantage. If I pulled up an example which went the other way, you wouldn't say, oh, it's really penalizing to play out of your division. No, you'll get fair number of points either way. Okay, so related to this, you can think of playing out of your division as an extreme form of playing in strong or weaker events. And if you look at strong or weaker events, there is also no statistical difference between them. So similarly to playing in or out of your division, there's no advantage or disadvantage to playing up or playing down, to playing in strong events or playing in weak events. Okay.
So Mark,
yep.
we have a few questions on that first section.
Please. Good. Thank you.
Coach Lorne Oak, why the wide significance in points awarded for a tournament? There are tournaments with weak fields on good courses receiving
Well,
50 points.
We'll get to that. We'll get to that. So that's coming up, Lauren. Thank you for the question.
Okay. Just a couple about Rollins,
Yep.
Mark. Jared Purvis has asked, Rollins finished in last place at the Tar Heel event and received 59 points for beating 0 teams.
Yep,
Please
we'll get to that.
explain.
Sorry, we're gonna get to that. I haven't done enough to be able to answer that question. We're gonna come to those.
Okay.
Are there any questions about this, what I've said, or playing up or playing down? In or out of the division? We'll get to how points are awarded in specific events soon.
Okay. This is from Denton Moore. Is there some kind of multiplier for a Division 2 team playing in a Division 1 event? Meaning,
Yes.
how can a Division 2 team finish last in a D1 event and receive more points than a D2 team that wins an event with D2 teams?
Okay, so the points are calculated internally across all divisions. For ranking purposes, there is a points multiplier for D2 teams, and there's a separate points multiplier for D3 teams. So what you see in the D2 and D3 rankings are points that have been affected by a points multiplier. And so when you say you get more or less points, you want to only look at a team's D2 points. So if they play out of their division in D1, what you see in the D1 events won't match what you see for the team that's a D2 team, because there is a points multiplier. But underneath all of this is a uniform ranking method that we display slightly differently depending on which division that you're in. So I hope that clarifies that, and thank you for those questions.
We have
a lot of the ones about, go ahead, Dan.
Sorry, Mark, we have a question from Thomas Adelsteinson. Apologies if I've got the pronunciation wrong. Originally, when the ranking system was introduced, playing cross-divisional was not supposed to be included in the rankings. Teams would only be compared with teams from their division. Some teams set up their full schedule with that in mind. Why did that change?
So my apologies for that. I was asked that in July, and I gave the answer that I thought was correct at the time. And what I have learned is that cross-divisional play and playing with 4-year accredited colleges are approved events, and they should be included in the rankings. From my viewpoint, I think this is a good move. It's a good change because there are some teams, if you take a look at Rollins College, that would be very difficult to rank if you did not take into account this out of division play. And there would be some teams that are unrankable because they played all of their fall events out of the division. So when you include the cross-divisional play, it's more accurate because you get many more connections through all of the teams, and it allows you to measure teams based on their entire portfolio of performance rather than just a subset. So I think it's more fair, it's more accurate, and it's consistent with the recommendations. And I'm sorry that I gave the incorrect answer in July because I was misunderstood. I didn't realize, so I apologize for that one.
I've got one more question, Mark, on this section. This is from Brandon Miller. What happens to points for individual players playing cross-division? Individual points don't adjust at all in the same way as team points in the ranking currently.
No, individual players have the same adjustment that teams do. So players are all sort of processed together in determining points, and then there's a points multiplier if an individual plays out of their division. So that allows kind of a consistent points, but whatever is done for teams is also done for individuals in the same way.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Should we move on to the next section? I think we have covered the questions around, and there's one actually. Sorry, there's one more from Boo Newsom. We've seen some teams in the NAIA earning more points for playing in events out of the NAIA. I thought you earn less for playing out of your division.
No, you do not. And The same results that I'm showing here. Apologize for not putting in the NAIA, but I've done that and they are similar. So if you're in the NAIA, playing in or out of the division is neither going to be an advantage nor a disadvantage. So it applies to that. It also applies to NJCAA as well.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Let's move on to the next section.
Okay, so a lot of questions were received. Why is Team X ranked in position Y? So this is going to require, going through in some level of detail. So here's an example. There is a number of questions about the ranking of Carnegie Mellon University. They played four stroke play events. And I'm highlighting one, the Golf Week October Classic. So the ranking of Carnegie Mellon is going to depend on their performance in these 4 events relative to everybody else that they played head-to-head. And then all of those opponents played many other events and many other teams head-to-head, and then that process continues on. So there's a mountain of interconnected information that I need to somehow summarize to give you some intuition. Why is a team ranked where they are? So if you take a look at the Golf Week October Classic, you can see they came in second. You can see their scores in this column. It's very hard to get an intuitive sense for scores because it could be a 1-round, 2-round, or 3-round event. It could be 5-count 4 or 6-count 5, whatever. So the next column translates scores into scores per player per round. So they look more like individual golf scores, even though they are team scores. So when we talk about head-to-head matching and we're looking at Carnegie Mellon's stroke difference with itself is 0. They lost to Pomona, so there's a 1.58 stroke per round per player difference. And if you go all the way down to the bottom, California Lutheran, there's a 6 stroke per player per round difference in their head-to-head. So if 2 teams play in the same events, that's a head-to-head competition, and we can observe their head-to-head stroke difference. And the 6 strokes per round per player corresponds to the 72 stroke difference that you see reported there. So you'll see this, you'll see these scores on the website, but internally everything is normalized to be scores per player per round. So all of these scores are then adjusted in the strokes gained procedure, and the differences between Carnegie Mellon and California Lutheran is also 6. The difference in strokes gained numbers are exactly the differences in head-to-head numbers, which are exactly the differences in scores adjusted to be per player per round. But in the next chart, I'm going to focus on the head-to-head stroke difference. And a lot of the questions are around, we beat a stronger team, why aren't we ranked higher than them? So we need to not only look at the head-to-head column, which is how much did they win or lose to various teams, but how strong were the opponents. And so we have the team's opponents' average points and also their rank that we're going to use to plot. So we're going to plot 2 things. How strong is the team? And then what is the head-to-head stroke difference? So here's how we're going to plot this. On the horizontal axis are average points, and these are stronger teams going to the right. And at the top, you can see the ranks, 50, 25, 10, and 1. These are better ranks. So just 2 different, my computer is moving. I'm not really that sloppy, but there's better ranks to the right. So going left and right, you're looking at stronger teams. The X is Carnegie Mellon. Their head-to-head stroke difference with themselves is 0. So what is this dot here in the lower left? Well, that's Denison University in this head-to-head against Carnegie Mellon. And this says Denison is a weaker team that Carnegie Mellon beats. So they beat by 2.75 strokes. So if you go back to this leaderboard and you look at Denison here, that's the 2.75 stroke differential with Carnegie Mellon. So as you go left or right, you see the stroke differential, and not erasing very well for some reason. If a dot appears to the left, what does it mean? It means Carnegie Mellon won the head-to-head. No, sorry. If a dot appears below, down here, it means Carnegie Mellon won the head-to-head against, in this case, Denison. And above they would, so think about up and down is this head-to-head difference. It's in the same order as a leaderboard. If a team finishes up here compared to Carnegie Mellon lost to them. If a team finishes at the below Carnegie Mellon finished better, or they beat them head-to-head. So just going through that a little bit more systematically, the green region to the left are weaker opponents, weaker than Carnegie Mellon. The region to the right, or in red, are the stronger opponents. The region below is where Carnegie Mellon wins in a head-to-head, and red above is where Carnegie Mellon loses. Okay? So if we put these together, the lower left are expected outcomes. This is where Carnegie Mellon beats lower ranked teams, which is what you would expect. So if Carnegie Mellon is ranked properly, there should be a lot of dots where Carnegie Mellon beats lower ranked teams. The upper right is where Carnegie Mellon loses to stronger teams. Those are also expected outcomes. And if the ranking system is right, there will be a lot of dots in that green region. The red region are upsets. It's where Carnegie Mellon lost to lower ranked teams. And that's going to happen because golf is golf, but there shouldn't be tons of dots in the upper left quadrant. The lower right also contains upsets. It's where Carnegie Mellon beats stronger teams. And again, if the system is fair, we would expect to have many more dots in the green regions and a few in the red regions. If that's not the case, then Carnegie Mellon is probably not ranked correctly. So it's trying to summarize Carnegie Mellon's head-to-head play against every team in every event. And this is what would happen if we put Carnegie Mellon ranked 20 and we see all those dots, which are all of the events. Okay? You can eyeball this and say, this does not make sense because look at all those upsets in the red lower right region. This would be unfair. You would expect on average that these points, if I drew the straight line, would go through the red X, and they do not. And there's too many points in the lower right, meaning this is not a good ranking. This is not a fair ranking for Carnegie Mellon because they beat so many better teams. They should be ranked better. So having them ranked, closer to 20 is nonsense. So we don't want to, we wouldn't expect that to be a fair ranking. What would a fair ranking look like? There is what a fair ranking would look like. All of the dots are in the green regions with two exceptions. The two upsets are those two events that Carnegie Mellon does a little bit better than two teams that are ranked higher. So this is, you may quibble that maybe you want to move that red X a little bit one way or the other, but this is the best mathematically that you can place that X in order to maximize the expected outcomes and minimize the upsets. So like I said, there's a couple of ties there, but there are very few upsets. And this is an example with, this is almost a perfect ranking for Carnegie Mellon, in that there's only two upsets out of every head-to-head competition that they played in the fall. Okay. The blue dashed line is just a regression line that summarizes those points, and you can see for lower ranked teams, for weaker teams, the head-to-head difference is greater. They beat weaker teams by more. So that's why this difference on the left is big. And as the teams become closer and closer in strength to Carnegie Mellon, their average stroke differential in head-to-head competition is smaller. And in fact, as you go to the right, on average, they lose their head-to-heads to stronger teams. There's only 3 data points to the right, so it's a little bit hard to see, but it said this regression line summarizes that entire scatter of every head-to-head competition for Carnegie Mellon. So that's why the X is where it is. And this is one, I hope, intuitive explanation of why Carnegie Mellon is ranked where they are. Let's take a look at a couple of other colleges just to see how this would work. This is Ithaca College. They are ranked 40, and every single dot is in the expected outcome green regions. There are no upsets. It would be hard to argue that Ithaca College should be ranked anything but 40th where it is. If you move the ranking, that red X to the left or right, you're just going to put extra dots into one of the upset regions and take them away from the expected outcomes. There's Methodist University, and you can see from Methodist University, there are a few upsets over here where they did lose a few to lower ranked teams. But for the most part, as you can tell, they beat the teams they should have, and they lost to the teams they should have, if that is a fair ranking at 25 for Methodist University. This is Washington University in St. Louis. Again, almost all the dots are in the green regions. They're beating their weaker opponents and they're losing to their stronger opponents, with very few exceptions. In this case, there's a couple of upsets in the upper left there. Those are barely upsets. So this is trying to visually show a ton of information how Washington University is fairly ranked. And let's go back to Carnegie Mellon. Well, Carnegie Mellon, a lot of the questions about why is Carnegie Mellon ranked there was looking at those 2 data points. Those were 2 upsets where Carnegie Mellon beat higher ranked teams. And so they stand out for sure, but those 2 outcomes don't outweigh, well, they lost to that higher ranked team, and this is how much they beat up on lower ranked teams. And it's all of that information that goes into the ranking, and you can be misled when you focus on a very small number of upsets. Let's take a look at the number 1 ranked team in the division. This is George Fox, and they're number 1. There's no teams to the right of them. There's no stronger teams if they're properly ranked at number 1. And this is how much they beat their lower ranked opponents in head-to-head play. And you can see with George Fox, there are 2 upsets up there in the upper left, but otherwise it gets every single head-to-head correct. Part of the reason for doing this is now we can compare Carnegie Mellon to George Fox on the same graph. So I'm going to take this regression line for Carnegie Mellon, this regression line for George Fox, the 2 blue dashed lines, and I'm going to put them on the same chart with a slightly different scale so it's easier to see. So which one is first? This is Carnegie Mellon at the top. This is George Fox at the bottom. So Carnegie Mellon is now in sort of pink. George Fox University is in blue. And the vertical difference between these 2 lines says that for equal strength opponents, George Fox beats those opponents by 2 strokes per round more than Carnegie Mellon does. So you can kind of see that if I go back and forth here, I don't know, it's a little bit hard to see, but the Carnegie Mellon line is above the George Fox line. That means George Fox beats opponents in head-to-head competition more when you adjust for their strength than Carnegie Mellon does. And let me tell you, a 2-stroke difference is really significant. It's really significant. There are a lot of examples of teams ranked 1 and 5 that would be much closer than this, but this is a very significant difference between the two. And it would be hard to argue, I think, that Carnegie Mellon should be ranked close to number 1 and close to George Fox, given all of these strokes. Really, this is, per player per round. When you add it up over the season and you're adjusting for the strength of the opponents, George Fox beat their opposition by many, many more strokes than Carnegie Mellon did. Okay, so this is another way to plot the data, which is going to be a little bit more helpful to look at individual events. So I'm still going to do something similar, which is on the horizontal axis, I'm going to look at the strength, with stronger being to the right and weaker being to the left. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all of the George Fox or Carnegie Mellon events in one event and put them where that event ranks in terms of strength. So this would be a strong event if it was over here, and a weak event is over there. So I'm going to take the same points and take the same strokes gain differences and plot them this way. So George Fox played in 5 stroke play events, and the strongest event by the field average strokes gain was over here. The weakest event was over there. So it's still strongest to the right, weakest to the left. And now on the left, I have what's similar to head-to-head stroke differential, but it's the event strokes gained. So this is in leaderboard order. You want to finish at the top. The top is the winner. And as you move down, those are teams that finished lower in that event. So better finishes are at the top, worse finishes are at the bottom. So we have, if you go from left to right, the NWC Fall Classic, the Confluence Women's, SMU, NCAA Preview, and then furthest to the right is George Fox versus Whitman, the dual match. So the events are ordered from weak to strong. And what I have, the bigger dots, those are the finishes of George Fox University. They had a win, they had a win, they had a win, they had a third in the NCAA Preview, and that's this one where they came in third, and then they had a win. So they had 4 wins and 1 third, and you can see their wins. So this is a way to visualize how did George Fox do in different events. And you can see their worst event was this one. Their best event was that one, but they had a couple of, good finishes, a couple of good or better than average performances, a couple that were a little bit worse than average. And if you average all of these and weight by the number of rounds over here, the average event strokes gained is George Fox's strokes gained. That's kind of how good they are doing. So here, what I wanted to point out is that their worst event was this one. That was the lowest in their event strokes gained, even though they won. They got fewer points because that winning performance against a weaker field wasn't as good as coming in third in a stronger field. So it is possible to get more points winning a weaker event than finishing third in a stronger event. But mostly, you see that George Fox earned points in this region, which corresponds to their average strokes gained and their rank. Let's look at Carnegie Mellon in the same light. Carnegie Mellon played in these 4 events where they finished with a win, a second, and a win. Okay, pretty good. But we can see from this that their worst event was this Q Memorial Invitational on the left. That was their worst event, even though it was a win. These three events, they played comparably well, or comparably above average. If you take a look at those four dots and you say, where would you draw an average? It would be somewhere there. Three events on the right were above average performances. The one event on the left was the below average performance. And this just happened to be the example of the three events on the right. Actually, I'm not sure what division they were in. So anyway, it can happen that you win an event and get fewer points. Okay. There were many questions about Rollins College. So Rollins College played in these four stroke play events. And you can look at the larger dot here to see where they finished. So there's Rollins here, here, and these two events have very similar field strength, so they're plotted almost at the top of each other. But those are the four events. The worst event for Rollins College was this blue NCAA Championship Fall Preview. Okay. Their best event was this Edisto Island Invitational over there. And this was the example that we saw before. Their worst performance happened to be in a D2 event, and all their performances in D1 events were better. And it also kind of shows how, even though they came in last, it was a very strong event, and they didn't come in last by very much. The difference between first and last was relatively small, where here the difference between first and last is huge. So stroke difference matters, and it is possible, though it doesn't happen very often, it is possible to come in last in a very strong event and get more points than finishing high in a very weak event. So it is possible. And let me sort of illustrate this with a few more events to see what kind of typically happens. So several coaches asked this question: how can a team earn more points winning event X than event Y? We've seen a couple of examples of that. Can a team earn more points winning a weak event than a strong event? And the answer is usually not, but it can happen. And so many of the questions were about this pair of events, the Blessing versus the Annika event. Arkansas won and got 173 points. University of South Carolina won the Annika and got 113. But the Annika was a slightly stronger event, and University of South Carolina got slightly fewer points. How can the win points be reversed? So I'm going to say, take this kind of event chart and do the exact same thing, but I'm going to plot, sorry, I'm going to take this kind of, calling it a, calling it an event chart, but just plot two events that, you know, may or may not have the same teams involved. So these two events are two D2 women's events. And let's see, you can see which event is stronger is on the right, which event is weaker on the left. And this is a typical case where the winner of the strong event gets more points than the winner of the weak event. The last place finish in the strong event gets more points than the last place finish in the weak event. And if you go middle of the pack, or if you go down position by position, 2 versus 2, 4 versus 4, however you do it, every position in the weak event gets fewer points than every position in the stronger event. This is what typically happens.
Mark, can we ask a couple of questions from the coaches, because we have got a lot of questions.
Sure.
A lot of questions in, and I'm very conscious of time.
Yep.
I'd like the first one from Brentley Romine. How do you determine how many points teams bring to a tournament when it is their first event of the season?
Teams do not bring points to tournaments. This is a different system, and no team brings points. The total points for events are not fixed. They are awarded based on the strokes gained in an event, And this is an example here where none of these teams brought points. None of the points were fixed in advance because this team finished first. That doesn't matter how many points. It's because they got this strokes gained in their event that determines their points. This team that finished last in the event doesn't get a fixed point number value for finishing last. You get the strokes gained for that team in that event, and then you just map that to points. So there are no fixed points per position in this, and this allows stroke differentials to matter, and it allows the possibility for strong teams to get fair points playing in weak events and vice versa.
Okay, next question from Mike Larkin. Why does a team's average points on the ranking list team page not always equal the calculated average points as seen on the event by event breakdown? So an example.
Yeah, we'll get to that one. So the main thing is that your average points on the ranking page is a weighted average that is weighted by the number of rounds, and that's an important point that we'll get to. So if one event is 3 rounds and another event is 1 round, the weighted average will take that into account.
Okay, this is a question from Ryan Blagg. Mark, can you discuss how a player can play the first round of a tournament and WD after round 1 and still
we'll get to WD later. Yeah, take that at the end.
Okay. Can you explain the criteria? This is from CC McMahon. Can you explain the criteria for stronger event and weaker event?
So what I'm doing is after the fact in this kind of chart, looking at the average strokes gained of the teams in this event, and you can think of it as kind of an average rank, and the teams that are playing in this are an average stronger than the teams playing on that, and I'm getting that by doing the same strokes gain calculation that we've seen in other ones where we saw that, you know, D1 teams have better strokes gain than D2 in general. D2 has better strokes gain than D3. Well, that same kind of strokes gain analysis you can just apply to the teams in a given event, and we're just plotting them based on the average strokes gained. So if you're to the right, you've got on average a higher strokes gained in the field, and so we're just calling it a stronger event. There's many different ways to measure strength of field, but this is one.
I'm very conscious of time. It's 5 o'clock now. We've got to get through match play and the Q&A. So just one final question in this section. From Zach Hale, how can you say that a school beat a better ranked team or lost to a worse ranked team when there were no rankings at all during tournament play this season?
Perfect. So this is looking for internal consistency of the rankings, and what many of the questions were, how can a team beat stronger teams, better ranked teams, and yet be ranked below them? And so that's basically a question about internal consistency. All of these rankings and strokes gained are all computed simultaneously based on all the information that's available. So you cannot compute a ranking after one event because you just don't have enough information and enough connections after 1 week, even 2 or 3 weeks. So after about half of the fall season, we could produce a reasonably reliable ranking, and at the end of the fall season we have plenty of information, but we can't do it sort of sequentially. We're putting it all into the system at once.
And there was just one question about the blessings versus Annika, which we received a lot of questions about in
advance. I'm going to get to that. That's coming right up.
Okay, all right. Well, let's move on then. In that case, it's 5 o'clock now, and there's a lot of people who would like to ask some questions after the match play section.
Okay, so here is this event where we have 2 events shown. This is also typical. Here's East Lake versus Edisto Island Invitational, and you can see that every team in the stronger event gets more points than every team in the weaker event. The winner gets more points in one than the other. The losers or the last place finishers get less points in the weak event than the strong event. This is very typical whenever you pick 2 events. Here's another, Butler versus Carmel Cup. this is a stronger event, and every team gets more points in the strong event than the teams in the weak event. Or, you know, the winners get more points, last place gets more points in the strong event, which in this case is the Carmel Cup. Most events are intuitive and understandable in this way. The Blessings Annika is an atypical example where they're actually not that far apart, but the Blessings is a little bit weaker than the Annika. And if you take a look at this, what people are looking at is, how can this winner of the Blessings get more points than the winner of the Annika? And here's the explanation for this. In the stronger events, second place gets more in the Annika. Third, the middle of the pack gets more, last place gets more. Every position gets more in the Annika than the Blessings, except for the winner of the Blessings. Why does the winner of the Blessings get more points? Because their stroke differential was very big, and they are rewarded for beating the number 2 ranked team, for beating the number 5 ranked team, or the 5th place team or the last place team in the Blessings by a lot. So this is an unusual case, and thanks everybody for finding it. Multiple people found this and are scratching their heads. How can this happen? Well, this is how it can happen. It is the case when there's one exception out of all of these examples that we're showing, where strong events get more points than weak events, strong events more points, strong events more points than weak events. And here in the Blessings and the Annika, the strong event, position for position, gets more points in the Annika than the Blessings. And the one exception to that is the winner of the Blessings. And the reason for that exception is the large margin of victory. And this is what's needed to make it fair for that team to get the points that they deserve. That said, the Blessings was 2 rounds, the Annika was 3 rounds, and so the winner of that event is going to only get credit for 2/3 of an event, and so it's not going to affect the ranking possibly by as much as the winner of the Annika. But the punchline here is stroke differential matters, and it is possible for a strong finish in a weak event to get more points in order for it to be fairly rewarded. Here's an example of Drury University, where this is where they're ranked, but multiple coaches said, we beat teams ahead of us and we lose the teams behind us. And you can see that's generally true, but there's a few exceptions here. And those exceptions are what people point to. But this team had a 78% win record against teams that were weaker, and a 28% win record against teams that were stronger. And if you think they should be ranked stronger and move this to the right, you're actually going to create more upsets and take more dots out of the green areas and put them into the red areas. So that regression line with the red X where it is a good ranking, I would argue, for Drury University. Okay, so match play. Lots of questions about match play. Why is match play included? How is it included? Well, the main reason is it's an approved event, and performance in approved events, I think, should be included according to the regulations and to lead to more accurate rankings than it would be if you ignored it. So what should happen to the ranks? Many people are worried when they see large point awards in a match play event. Okay, in SEC match play, Alabama got 72 points for 1 match win. How is that possible? So a lot of questions about points in match play. So let me pose a hypothetical here. Team ranked 9, I'm going to call it team 9, wins a match against team ranked 10. In a fair ranking system, that's before this one match. They play a 1-round match and team 9 wins. What should happen to teams 9 ranking after the match play win? And I was hoping to do a poll or a show of hands or something. but I'm going to tell you what I think is what you think is the answer here. Team 9 wins. Should they move up from 9 to 5 or even better? I doubt it. Should team be ranked 9 or worse? Well, no, I don't think they should move down if they win a match. So that shouldn't be the case. I hope everybody agrees they should be ranked 9 or better. So after match play win, a team's rank should stay the same or improve. Conversely, after match play loss, a team's rank should stay the same or decline. I hope this is intuitive and sensible and is a reasonable definition of fairness in match play. The system guarantees that this will happen. If you win, you will stay the same or move up. If you lose, you'll stay the same or move down. The next question is, well, how big should the move be? This is a little bit harder, but you probably have a lot more intuition from years past than I do. Team X, imagine they're a top 20 team and they play a match against the team ranked just below them. So 15 plays 16 or 8 plays 9. So they win against the team ranked just below them. We know they should stay the same or move up, but the question is by how much? Should they move up on average 1 position or 2 positions or 3 positions? What do you think makes sense here for a team playing and winning against another team that is as closely ranked to them as possible? Should it be a rank move of 1, a rank move of 2, or a rank move of 3? And I don't know, but think about this before I reveal what I think you think, which is my guess is that most people will say A, maybe some will say B, and maybe a few will say C. But I'm guessing that most of you think that a win in a single round match play event ought to have a small effect on your ranking, but not a big effect, not 2 or 3 positions. So what actually happens? Well, let's take a look at when Team 9 plays Team 10. This is a real example with East Tennessee State and University of Virginia. Team 9 has 60 points. Team 10 has 55. Those are pretty close. Team 9 wins the match and gets 87 points. Team 10 loses the match and gets 28. Okay. So people's first reaction is, wow, that's a lot of points. Well, let's see what are the ranking implications. I think that's the most important takeaway here is what happens to the team's ranks. Okay, so let's take a look at that. Before, Team 9 had 60 points, and they got those in 15 rounds. They just earned 87 points for winning this match against Team 10. Their average goes up from 60 to 61.7. They now have 16 rounds under their belt, and their rank did not change. This is because a match has a weight of 1 round, which is 1/3 of the weight of a 3-round stroke play event. And in the fall, with 15 rounds, 1 more match is going to have, a 1/15 the effect on the overall average. Team 10 lost the match. Their average before was 55. Here I gave more and more desk place, 54.9. They earned 28 points. Their average goes down by about 2 points. And they went down from rank 10 to rank 14, down 4 spots. They went down by a little bit more, not because of their change in their average, but because they had teams that were very close to them in ranks 15, 16, and 17. So the amount of the movement depends on not only how much did your average change, but how close were the teams to you. But the main punchline here is that a match play outcome contributes 1/3 the weight of a 3-round stroke play event. And that 1/3 weight implies relatively small changes in a team's average points and their team rank, even though the points optically look pretty big. So this is just one example. I want to give you a more systematic, thorough analysis of the data and say, what would happen? This is now NCAA D1 men's teams. If a team in the top 20 wins a match against a team very close by, their median move up is about 1 spot. For NCAA D2 women, in the top 20, if they play a team very closely matched to them, the median rank move is 0. Wow. From 21 to 50, well, when you get further down in the rankings, the movements will be a little bit bigger. Here in D1 men, winning a match will move you on average about 2 spots up. 21 to 50 for D2 women, winning a match will move you on average a half a spot up. And you get similar small moves for losing. So the punchline here, and it's really, really important, is that the points may look large, but the ranked moves are very much in line with expectations and basically what should happen. And I think one of our takeaways from all of this is that we're thinking about better ways to show this on the website. Okay, strength of field matters. So here's an example where we saw Team 9 beating Team 10. What happens if Team 9 plays Team 65? What happens? Well, if Team 9 beats Team 10 or beats Team 65, what's going to happen? In both cases, Team 9's rank should stay the same or improve. But in one case, Team 9 beating Team 10 is an upset. Is an expected outcome. So they shouldn't. Oh man, I'm trying to go through this too quickly. Let me just skip this. I'll come back to it if you want. Let's go to a match play individual example. This was asked by a couple of coaches. Men's individual, Nick Dunlap wins a match, earns 108 points. Teammate earns 19 points. How is that possible that they both win? They're both on the same team, and one gets 108, the other gets 19 points. Is there a benefit for match play for playing lower ranked players? And the answer is no. So let me go through this example in a little bit of detail rather than the others. Nick Dunlap started with 103 average points and won a match. He's got to get at least 103 points to stay the same or move up. Player 119 came into this match with 19 points and lost the match. Player 119, rank 119, has to get fewer than 19 points to stay the same or move down. So the points that they bring in this case are 122, and they're split the 122 points in a way that players 1 rank stays the same or goes up, player rank 119 stays the same or go down. The ranking moves with those are small because the points are relative to the player's current average. If you take a look now over here at a player ranked 335 who beats a player ranked 158, those 2 players bring a total of 28 points to the match. For player 335 to move up, player 335 needs to get more than 9 points. And in fact, winning this match, the player gets 19 points. Player 158 loses the match, has 19 average points. To lose, he has to get fewer. It's just a coincidence that the numbers are reversed here, but they split the 28 points in a way that player 335 is going to move up and player 158 is going to move down. This is an upset because player 335 beat player 158, and you'll have slightly bigger ranking moves for upsets than when there's the expected outcome. So I think this is one of the most confusing things about match play is you can win and get different numbers of points, but the points are awarded so that you will get the expected kinds of ranking moves. And this way of awarding points does exactly that.
Mark,
So,
could we
yes,
ask
please.
a few questions in the interest of time, because it's
Yep.
5:15 now. There are
Yep.
a lot of questions, and I think that we could possibly share this presentation with all the attendees. There's a question from Kaylin Anderson. How can a team beating one team in match play get more points than a team winning a tournament field of 12 teams?
The one match play is given 1/3 the weight and can have a smaller ranking impact than the stroke play, which is 3 rounds. So a lot of things can happen, and a lot of these questions involve outliers. Some of the questions are unusual situations, But the main takeaway is that in match play, let's go back here. In match play, you get a third the weights. Let's go back here. You get a third the weight in, sorry for going back and forth, a third the weight in a match play event compared to a 3-round stroke play events.
Okay, can I go back to Lorne Oak's question? Why the wide significance in points awarded for a tournament? There are tournaments with weak fields on good courses receiving 50 points for first, and tournaments with strong fields on good courses receiving 12 points for the winner.
That's exactly the Blessings Annika example. It's the same kind of question here. You have a stronger field and a weaker field. And in almost every case, the stronger field gets more points. The stronger field gets more points. The stronger field gets more points. It's also true in the Blessings Annika case. The stronger field gets more points with the exception of one player who happened to perform really, really well. And so many of the questions are kind of similar. We use this as an example to try and answer a lot of similar questions.
And that was a question from Ryan Potter on the Blessings about the individual portion of the Blessings, the massive amount of points won by the individual winner. So perhaps you want to just address that one again.
That's the similar. This is a team example, but the same thing can happen with individual players.
Okay, a question I asked earlier, just again in the interest of time, because we don't have a lot of time left. Ryan Blagg, Mark, can you discuss how a player can play the first round of a tournament and withdraw after round one and still receive more points than a player that played all 54 holes and finished second in the tournament? Example, Caleb Surratt at Tennessee's Visit Knoxville Collegiate.
So the withdrawals are not currently handled, and they will be. A withdrawal will earn you 0 points and count as a round, and that's not currently being done as we're kind of fighting through some data and data issues, I would say. But the plan is a DQ or a withdrawal will get 0 points. So there will never be an incentive to pull out of a round if you're about to shoot a high score. So in that example that you mentioned, that will change because the player who has a WD will get 0 points for that, and it will be unlikely when you include that they'll get more points than the other players. So that's an important point, and thank you for bringing it up, and that is still to come in the rankings.
Okay, just going back to Thomas Adelsteinson's question, how is a dual match a stronger event than the NCAA preview for George Fox?
So it's a little bit hard when you have a dual match to say it's a stronger event when there's only 2 teams. So this is a little bit where there's different ways to measure the strength of the field. In this case, if you have 2 strong teams, even though there's only 2 teams, those 2 teams, not exactly, but they're going to kind of split points or get points about where they are. So even though there's only 2 teams there, it can happen that you can have two strong teams, and if these other teams all got together and played a match, almost everybody there is weaker than that. So it's possible if you have 2 strong teams playing a match, there can be a stronger field by this definition than weaker. It depends on how highly ranked are the 2 teams in the match versus how highly ranked are all the other teams. But I agree with your point that it is easier to win against one other team than many other teams. And that's partly why you can see more variability in a 2-team match, and there's less variability in a multi-team event. So this other measure of strength of field, how easy or how difficult is an event to win, certainly depends on the number of teams, and that's not taken into account in this particular chart. So that I agree with your point. This doesn't really take that into consideration, I don't think, very well. It's just a plotting of the points, though.
This is a question from Carly Ludwig. Mark, do you think your system fairly takes into account the fact that we are a team and we hardly have the same lineups or have players that are sick or injured? We don't have the option to withdraw, and in college we can't do that. We have to play.
Yeah. This does not take into account, unfortunately, any of those. We only rank the teams based on the data that we get, and performances count. And if players are injured, it's an unfortunate sort of fact of life. And if there is some other way to handle that is suggested, we're certainly open to that. But currently, we know nothing about injuries that affect the rankings. Since we don't know it, since it's not in the data, it's not in the rankings. We need to get that in the data if it was a strong feeling that would be more fair.
Got one more question here from CC McMahon. This makes sense for teams that win a lot to be having the dispersion in the bottom left quadrant. I think this was going back to one of your previous slides.
Mm-hmm.
Can you show how teams that have a significant losing record and dots in the upper right are ranked so well? I don't know whether that's possible with those slides. I realize that's a question.
Yeah, I probably need some other slides here, but this is Ithaca College, the lowest ranked team, I guess. So they have a lot of dots in the upper right. They lose to every team that is stronger or ranked better. So I could do more examples than this, but here's an example with a lot of dots in the upper right and a lot of dots in the lower left. And so that's kind of how you want to put that X to split the data in this way. So in this case, it's perfect. There's no dots in the red region and all the dots are in the green regions.
Okay, I'm just going to call up a couple more, Mark, because we've got 5 minutes left.
Yep.
There's still a couple of questions about the multiplier. There is a multiplier for playing upper division, which clearly makes us all want to go and play Division 1 events. This is a message. This is a question from Denton Moore.
No, so
because there is no punishment or consequence to playing up and you get your points multiplied. You essentially get more points for a last place finish by the multiplier than you do for winning a D2 event.
Yeah.
We will all be looking at D1 fields only going forwards.
Yeah, so the multiplier is just for display purposes at the end. All of the points are calculated internally on a consistent, the same point system. So typically, you get more points in D1 than you get in D2 and D3. And if you play outside the division, just for display purposes, there is a multiplier to make it look good when you look at the rankings. But there is no predetermined multiplier that you'll get more points or less points playing up or down. The points are just multiplied for display purposes. Internally, there's one set point system. So I hope that we will try and make the FAQ a little bit more clear on that point.
I think to that point, it's nearly 1:30. Well, we're nearly at the 90 minutes now. We realize we haven't answered all the questions. We have captured all the questions. And to Mark's point, we will address the questions in the FAQs. And as Piers Parnell said at the outset, there is an opportunity to join the webinar that's taking place at the same time next Tuesday. Piers, over to you.
Thanks, Dan. And I think mainly, obviously, predominantly thanks to everyone that has signed in and been very actively involved. Just again, to repeat and reassure all of the questions that have come through the chat, all the questions that were harvested beforehand, they are all now very much in the system. We will be passing those through to Professor Broadie and doing everything that we can to support visibility on that front. Certainly appreciate that there was a lot of information exchange here. Hopefully that is in part in the spirit of trying to create a better and more transparent environment for all of you. Equally, as I go through the questions and the whole team here at Clip to go through the questions as they were coming in live, very conscious there are still plenty of things that remain unanswered. But rest assured, everyone on this call from the NCAA side of things, from Professor Broadie's side of things, and obviously from our side of things in terms of supporting the clarity, everyone's very committed to making sure that people get get the answers to their queries. So as Dan said, there's also the opportunity to be part of the next webinar on a week today. And finally, as per my initial remarks, we will also be at the coaches convention in a couple of weeks, and there'll be two sessions, panel sessions, including ourselves and Professor Broadie. I think there are probably a number of other sessions that the GCAA and WGCA are also putting on in terms of the schedule. So please make sure, if you're able to, that you if you can come to that. Obviously, that would be great. From a CLIP point of view, we are very keen to take on board thoughts and insights as to how you would like the overall platform to work and to evolve and develop. But that is a separate point and outside the purview of this conversation. But just to say thank you very much from me, Mark and John. I don't know if you just want to say a couple of final remarks, but certainly we really appreciate all the time and effort that people have taken to be here, and we will, as I say, curate all of the questions and pass them on to Professor Broadie. Thank you.
Yes, just one quick comment. I realized I talked a lot as far as instead of taking questions, what we compiled many questions coming in, and I tried to create a presentation that would answer in a systematic way several types of similar questions, because that was trying to hit all the questions or many of the questions simultaneously. So I wanted to say thank you for your time today. Thanks for all the questions you sent in. Thanks for your suggestions and feedback up until now and going forward. And our goal is together to make this the best college golf ranking system and platform that is possible. So thanks very much.
Agreed. Thank you everyone for your time today. Professor Broadie, thanks for running through that. Hopefully this is obviously a lot to unpack in terms of information and a lot that's been captured and talked through today. Hopefully the first in what for the next 3 weeks at least will be continuing conversation around this and hopefully a greater understanding across the board of how things have arrived where they have in terms of the rankings themselves. So I know we're at the 90-minute mark. So Dan, thanks for moderating today as well, and for everybody's assistance. Hope everybody has a great Thanksgiving, and we'll look forward to seeing many of you this time next week.
Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. Appreciate it.